Right. Myths and Legends of Hawaii, Ancient Lore Retold by W.D. Westervelt. Maui the Fisherman. Oh, the great fishhook of Maui, Manaikalani, made fast to the heavens, its name. An earth-twisted cord ties the hook, engulfed from the lofty Kaiki. Its bait the red-billed alei, the bird made sacred to Hina. It sinks far down to Hawaii, struggling and painfully dying. Caught is the land under the water, floated up to the surface. But Hina hid a wing of the bird and broke the land under the water. Below was the bait snatched away and eaten at once by the fishes, the ulua of the deep, muddy places. One of Maui's homes was near Kaiki, a place well known throughout the Hawaiian Islands because of its strategic importance. For many years, it was the site of a fort around which fierce battles were fought by the natives of the island of Maui, repelling the invasions of their neighbors from Hawaii. Haleakala, the House of the Sun, the mountain from which Maui, the demigod, snared the sun, looks down 10,000 feet upon the Kauiki headland. Across the channel from Haleakala rises Mauna Kea, the White Mountain or the snow-capped, which almost all the year round rears its white head in majesty among the clouds. In the snowy breakers of the surf, which washes the beach below these mountains, are broken coral reefs, the fishing grounds of the Hawaiians. Here, near Kauiki, according to some Hawaiian legends, Maui's mother, Hina, had her grass house and made and dried her kapa cloth. Even to the present day, it is one of the few places in the islands where the kapa is still pounded into sheets from the bark of the hibiscus and kindred trees. Here is a small bay partially reef protected, over which year after year the moist clouds float and by day and by night crown the waters with rainbows, the legendary sign of the home of the deified ones. Here, when the tide is out, the natives wade and swim, as they have done for centuries, from coral block to coral block, shunning the deep resting places of their dread enemy, the shark, sometimes esteemed divine. Out on the edge of the outermost reef, they seek the shellfish which cling to the coral, or spear the large fish which have been left in the beautiful little lakes of the reef. Coral Land is a region of the seacoast abounding in miniature lakes and rugged valleys and steep mountains. Clear waters with every motion of the tide surge in and out through the sheltered caves and submarine tunnels, according to an ancient Hawaiian song. Never quiet, never failing, never sleeping, never very noisy is the sea of the sacred caves. Sea mosses of many hues are the forests which drape the hillsides of Coral Land and reflect the colored rays of light, which pierce the ceaselessly moving waves. Down in the beautiful little lakes, under overhanging coral cliffs, darting in and out through the fringes of seaweed, the purple mullet and royal red fish flash before the eyes of the fishermen. Sometimes the many-tinted, glorious fish of paradise reveal their beauties. And then again, a school of black and gold citizens of the reef follow the tidal waves around projecting crags and through the hidden tunnels from lake to lake, while above the fisherman follows, spearing or snaring as best he can. Maui's brothers were better fishermen than he. They sought the deep sea beyond the reef and larger fish. They made hooks of bone or of mother of pearl, with a straight, slender, sharp-pointed piece leaning backward at a sharp angle. This was usually a consecrated bit of bone or mother of pearl, and was supposed to have peculiar power to hold fast any fish which had taken the bait. These bones were usually taken from the body of someone who, while living, had been noted for great power or high rank. This sharp piece was tightly tied to the larger bone or shell, which formed the shank of the hook. The sacred barb of Maui's hook was a part of the magic bone he had secured from his ancestors in the underworld, the bone with which he struck the sun whole, lassoing him and compelling him to move more slowly through the heavens. Earth-twisted fibers of vine, twisted while growing, was the cord used by Maui in tying the parts of his magic hook together. Long and strong were the fish lines made from the olona fiber, holding the great fish caught from the depths of the ocean. The fibers of the olona vine were among the longest and strongest found in the Hawaiian Islands. Such a hook could easily be cast loose by the struggling fish, if the least opportunity were given. Therefore, it was absolutely necessary to keep the line taut and pull strongly and steadily to land the fish in the canoe. Maui did not use his magic hook for a long time. He seemed to understand that it would not answer ordinary needs. Possibly the idea of making the supernatural hook did not occur to him until he had exhausted his lower wit and magic upon his brothers. It is said that Maui was not a very good fisherman. Sometimes his end of the canoe contained fish which his brothers had thought were on their hooks until they were landed in the canoe. Many times they laughed at him for his poor success, and he retaliated with his mischievous tricks. "Ee!" he would cry when one of his brothers began to pull in, while the other brothers swiftly paddled the canoe forward. "Ee! See, we both have caught a great fish at the same moment. Be careful now. Your line is loose. Look out, look out." All this time, he would be pulling his own line in as rapidly as possible. Onward rushed the canoe, each fisherman shouting to encourage the others. Soon the lines, by the tricky manipulation of Maui, would be crossed. Then, as the great fish was brought near the side of the boat, Maui, the mischievous one, would slip his hook toward the head of the fish and flip it over into the canoe, causing his brother's line to slacken for a moment. Then his mournful cry rang out, "Oh, my brother, your fish is gone. Why did you not pull more steadily? It was a fine fish, and now it is down deep in the waters." Then Maui held up his splendid catch from his brother's hook and received somewhat suspicious congratulations. But what could they do? Maui was the smart one of the family. Their father and mother were both members of the household of the gods. The father was the supporter of the heavens, and the mother was the guardian of the way to the invisible world. But pitifully small and very few were the gifts bestowed upon their children. Maui's brothers knew nothing beyond the average home life of the ordinary Hawaiian, and Maui alone was endowed with the power to work miracles. Nevertheless, the student of Polynesian legends learns that Maui is more widely known than almost all the demigods of all nations as a discoverer of benefits for his fellows, and these physical rather than spiritual. After many fishing excursions, Maui's brothers seemed to have wit enough to understand his tricks, and thenceforth they refused to take him in their canoe when they paddled out to the deep sea fishing grounds. Then those who depended upon Maui to supply their daily needs murmured against his poor success. His mother scolded him, and his brothers ridiculed him. The ex-queen Liliuokalani, in a translation of what is called the family chant, says that Maui's mother sent him to his father for a hook with which to supply his need. "Go hence to your father. 'Tis there you find line and hook. This is the hook made fast to the heavens. Manai ka lani, 'tis called. When the hook catches land, it brings the old seas together. Bring hither the large alei, the bird of Hina." When Maui had obtained his hook, he tried to go fishing with his brothers. He leaped on the end of their canoe as they pushed out into deep water. They were angry and cried out, "This boat is too small for another Maui." They threw him off and made him swim back to the beach. When they returned from their day's work, they brought back only a shark. Maui told them if he had been with them, better fish would have been upon their hooks. The alua, for instance, or possibly the pomoi, the king of fish. At last, they let him go far out, outside the harbor of Kipahula, to place opposite Kai Iwi o Pele, the bone of Pele, a peculiar piece of lava lying near the beach at Hina on the eastern side of the island of Maui. There they fished, but only sharks were caught. The brothers ridiculed Maui, saying, "Where are the ulua and where is Pomoi?" Then Maui threw his magic hook into the sea, baited with one of the alei birds, sacred to his mother and Hina. He used the incantation, "When I let go my hook with divine power, then I get the great ulua." The bottom of the sea began to move. Great waves arose, trying to carry the canoe away. The fish pulled the canoe 2 days, drawing the line to its fullest extent. When the slack began to come in the line, because of the tired fish, Maui called for the brothers to pull hard against the coming fish. Soon land rose out of the water. Maui told them not to look back or the fish would be lost. One brother did look back. The line slacked, snapped, and broke, and the land lay behind them in islands. Maui evidently had no scruples against using anything which would help him carry out his schemes. He indiscriminately robbed his friends and the gods alike. Down in the deep sea sank the hook with its struggling bait until it was seized by the land under the water. But Hina, the mother, saw the struggle of her sacred bird and hastened to the rescue. She caught a wing of the bird, but could not pull the alei from the sacred hook. The wing was torn off. Then the fish gathered around the bait and tore it in pieces. If the bait could have been kept entire, then the land would have come up in a continent rather than as an island. Then the Hawaiian group would have been unbroken. But the bait broke, and the islands came as fragments from the underworld. Maui Lifting the Sky. Maui's home was for a long time enveloped by darkness. The heavens had fallen down, or rather, had not been separated from the earth. According to some legends, the skies pressed so closely and so heavily upon the earth that when the plants began to grow, all the leaves were necessarily flat. According to other legends, the plants had to push up the clouds a little, and thus the leaves were caused to flatten out into larger surfaces so that they could better drive the skies back and hold them in place. Thus the leaves became flat at first and have so remained through all the days of mankind. The plants lifted the sky inch by inch until men were able to crawl about between the heavens and the earth, and thus pass from place to place and visit one another. After a long time, according to the Hawaiian legends, a man supposed to be Maui came to a woman and said, "Give me a drink from your gourd calabash, and I will push the heavens higher." The woman handed the gourd to him. When he had taken a deep draught, he braced himself against the clouds and lifted them to the height of the trees. Again he hoisted the sky and carried it to the tops of the mountains. Then, with great exertion, he thrust it upwards once more and pressed it to the place it now occupies. Nevertheless, dark clouds many times hang low along the eastern slope of Maui's great mountain, Haleakala, and descended in heavy rains upon the hill Kauiki. But they dare not stay, lest Maui the strong come and hurl them so far away that they cannot come back again. A man who had been watching the process of lifting the sky ridiculed Maui for attempting such a difficult task. When the clouds rested on the tops of the mountains, Maui turned to punish his critic. The man had fled to the other side of the island. Maui rapidly pursued and finally caught him on the seacoast, not many miles north of the town now known as Lahaina. After a brief struggle, the man was changed, according to the story, into a great black rock, which can be seen by any traveler who desires to localize the legends of Hawaii. Maui Snares the Sun. The moon, pale and dead in appearance, moved slowly, while the sun, full of life and strength, moved quickly. Thus days were very short and nights were very long. Mankind suffered from the fierceness of the heat of the sun and also from its prolonged absence. Day and night were alike a burden to men. The darkness was so great and lasted so long that fruits would not ripen. After Maui had succeeded in throwing the heavens into their place and fastening them so that they could not fall, he learned that he had opened a way for the sun god to come up from the lower world and rapidly run across the blue vault. This made two troubles for men. The heat of the sun was very great, and the journey too quickly over. Maui planned to capture the sun and punish him for thinking so little about the welfare of mankind. Maui's mother was troubled very much by the heedless haste of the sun. She had many kapa cloths to make, for this was the only kind of clothing known in Hawaii, except sometimes a woven mat or a long grass fringe worn as a skirt. This native cloth was made by pounding the fine bark of certain trees with wooden mallets until the fibers were beaten and ground into a wood pulp. Then she pounded the pulp into thin sheets from which the best sleeping mats and clothes could be fashioned. These kapa cloths had to be thoroughly dried, but the days were so short that by the time she had spread out the kapa, the sun had heedlessly rushed across the sky and gone down into the underworld, and all the cloth had to be gathered up again and cared for until another day should come. There were other troubles. The food could not be prepared and cooked in one day. Even an incantation to the gods could not be chanted through ere they were overtaken by darkness. These ills were very discouraging and caused great suffering, as well as unnecessary trouble and labor. Many complaints were made against the thoughtless sun. Maui pitied his mother and determined to make the sun go slower so that the days might be long enough to satisfy the needs of men. Therefore, he went over to the northwest of the island on which he lived. This was Mount Io, an extinct volcano, in which lies one of the most beautiful and picturesque valleys of the Hawaiian Islands. He climbed the ridges until he could see the course of the sun as it passed over the island. He saw that the sun came up the eastern side of Mount Haleakala. He crossed over the plain between the two mountains and climbed to the top of Haleakala. There he watched the burning sun as it came up from Kulau and passed directly over the top of the mountain. The summit of Haleakala is a great extinct crater nearly 20 miles in circumference and nearly 2,500 feet in depth. There are two tremendous gaps or chasms in the side of the crater wall, through which in days gone by the massive bull poured forth its flowing lava. One of these was the Kulau, or Eastern Gap, in which Maui probably planned to catch the sun. The Hawaiian legend says Maui was taunted by a man who ridiculed the idea that he could snare the sun, saying, "You'll never catch the sun. You're only an idle nobody." Maui replied, "When I conquer my enemy and my desire is attained, I will be your death." After studying the path of the sun, Maui returned to his mother and told her that he would go and cut off the legs of the sun so that he could not run so fast. His mother said, "Are you strong enough for the work?" And he said, "Yes." Then she gave him 15 strands of well-twisted fiber and told him to go to his grandmother, who lived in the great crater of Haleakala, for the rest of the things needed for his conflict with the sun. She said, "You must climb the mountain to the place where the large willy tree is standing. There you will find the place where the sun stops to eat cooked bananas prepared by your grandmother. Stay there until a rooster crows 3 times. Then watch your grandmother go out to make a fire and put on food. You had better take away her bananas. She will look for them and find you and ask who you are. Tell her you belong to Hina." When she had taught him all these things, he went up the mountain to Kaupo, to the place Hina had directed. There was a large willy tree. Here he waited for the rooster to crow. The name of that rooster was Kalua Helemoha. When the rooster had crowed 3 times, the grandmother came out with a bunch of bananas to cook for the sun. She took off the upper part of the bunch and laid it down. Maui immediately snatched it away. In a moment, she turned to pick it up, but could not find it. She was angry and cried out, "Where are the bananas of the sun?" Then she took off another part of the bunch, and Maui stole that. Thus he did until all the bunch had been taken away. She was almost blind and could not detect him by sight. She sniffed all around her until she detected the smell of a man. She asked, "Who are you? To whom do you belong?" Maui replied, "I belong to Hina." "Why have you come?" Maui told her, "I have come to kill the sun. He goes so fast that he never dries the kappa Hina. He never dries the kappa Hina has beaten out." The old woman gave him a magic stone for a battle axe and 1 more rope. She taught him how to catch the sun, saying, "Make a place to hide here by this large willy tree. When the first leg of the sun comes up, catch it with your first rope, and so on until you have used all your ropes. Fasten them to the tree, then take the stone axe to strike the body of the sun." Maui dug a hole among the roots of the tree and concealed himself. Soon the first ray of light, the first leg of the sun, came up along the mountainside. Maui threw his rope and caught it. One by one, the legs of the sun came over the edge of the crater's rim and were caught. Only 1 long leg was still hanging down the side of the mountain. It was hard for the sun to move that leg. It shook and trembled and tried hard to come up. At last it crept over the edge and was caught by Maui with the rope given by his grandmother. When the sun saw that his 16 long legs were held fast by the ropes, he began to go back down the mountainside into the sea. Then Maui tied the ropes fast to the tree and pulled until the body of the sun came up again. Brave Maui caught his magic stone, club, or axe and began to strike and wound the sun until he cried, "Give me my life!" Maui said, "If you live, you may be a traitor. Perhaps I'd better kill you." But the sun begged for life. After they had conversed a while, they agreed that there should be a regular motion in the journey of the sun. There should be longer days, and yet half the time he might go quickly, as in the wintertime, but the other half he must move slowly, as in summer. Thus men dwelling on the earth should be blessed. Maui returned from his conflict with the sun and sought for Moi, the man who had ridiculed him. Maui chased this man around the island from one side to the other until they had passed through Lahaina, there on the seashore, near the large black rock of the legend of Maui lifting the sky. He found Moi. Then they left the seashore, and the contest raged uphill and down until Maui slew the man and changed the body into a long rock, which is there to this day by the side of the road going past Black Rock. Maui finds fire. Hina, Maui's mother, wanted fish. One morning early, Maui saw that the great storm waves of the sea had died down and the fishing grounds could be easily reached. He awakened his brothers and with them hastened to the beach. This was at Kaupo on the island of Maui. Out into the gray shadows of the dawn they paddled. When they were far from the shore, they began to fish. But Maui, looking landward, saw a fire on the mountainside. "Behold," he cried, "there is a fire burning. Whose can this fire be?" "Whose indeed?" his brothers replied. "Let us hasten to the shore and cook our food," said one. They decided that they had better catch some fish to cook before they returned. Thus, in the morning, before the hot sun drove the fish deep down to the dark recesses of the sea, they fished until a bountiful supply lay in the bottom of the canoe. When they came to land, Maui leaped out and ran up the mountainside to get the fire. For a long, long time, they had been without fire. The great volcano, Haleakala, above them had become extinct, and they had lost the coals they had tried to keep alive. They had eaten fruits and uncooked roots, and the shellfish broken from the reef, and sometimes the great raw fish from the far-out ocean. But now they hoped to gain living fire and cooked food. But when Maui rushed up toward the cloud pillar of smoke, he saw a family of birds scratching the fire out. Their work was finished, and they flew away just as he reached the place. Maui and his brothers watched for fire day after day, but the birds, the curly-tailed alei, or mud hens, made no fire. Finally, the brothers went fishing once more. When they looked toward the mountain, again they saw flames and smoke. Thus it happened to them again and again. Maui proposed to his brothers that they go fishing, leaving him to watch the birds. But the alei counted the fishermen and refused to build a fire for the hidden one who was watching them. They said among themselves, "3 are in the boat, and we know not where the other one is. We will make no fire today." Thus the experiment failed again and again. If 1 or 2 remained, or if all waited on the land, there would be no fire. But the dawn that saw the 4 brothers in the boat saw also the fire on the land. Finally, Maui rolled some kapa cloth together and stuck it up in one end of the canoe so that it would look like a man. He then concealed himself near the haunt of the mud hens, while his brothers went out fishing. The birds counted the figures in the boat and then started to build a heap of wood for the fire. Maui was impatient. Just as the old alei began to select sticks with which to make the flames, he leaped swiftly out and caught her and held her prisoner. He forgot for a moment that he wanted the secret of fire making. In his anger against the wise bird, his first impulse was to taunt her and then kill her for hiding the secret of fire. The alei cried out, "If you are the death of me, my secret will perish also, and you cannot have fire." Maui then promised to spare her life if she would tell him what to do. Then came the contest of wits. The bird told the demigod to rub the stalks of water plants together. He guarded the bird and tried the plants. Water instead of fire ran out of the twisted stems. Then she told him to rub reeds together, but they bent and broke and could make no fire. He twisted her neck until she was half dead. Then she cried out, "I have hidden the fire in a green stick." Maui worked hard, but not a spark of fire appeared. Again, he caught his prisoner by the head and wrung her neck, and she named a kind of dry wood. Maui rubbed the sticks together, but they only became warm. The neck twisting process was resumed and repeated again and again until the mud hen was almost dead, and Maui had tried tree after tree. At last, Maui found fire. Then, as the flames rose, he said, "There is one more thing to rub. He took a fire stick and rubbed the top of the head of his prisoner until the feathers fell off and the raw flesh appeared. Thus, the Hawaiian mud hen and her descendants have ever since had bald heads, and the Hawaiians have had the secret of fire making. Maui and Piapia, the eight-eyed. Maui had been fishing and had caught a great fish upon which he was feasting. He looked inland and saw his wife, Kumalama, seized and carried away by Pea-pea Makawalu, Pea-pea, the eight-eyed. Maui pursued Pea-pea, but could not catch him. He carried Maui's wife over the sea to a faraway island. Maui was greatly troubled, but his grandmother sent him inland to find an old man who would tell him what to do. Maui went inland and, looking down toward Waipahu, saw this man, Keolokele. He was humpbacked. Maui threw a large stone and, hitting the hill on the back, knocked it off and made the back straight. The old man lifted up the stone and threw it to Waipahu, where it lies to this day. Then he and Maui talked together. He told Maui to go and catch birds and gather tea leaves and fibers of the aiai vine and fill his house. These things Maui secured and brought to him. He told Maui to go home and return after 3 days. Kuolokele took the tea leaves and the aiai threads and made the body of a great bird, which he covered with bird feathers. He fastened all together with the aiai. This was done on the first day. The second day, he placed food inside and tried his bird, and it flew out all right. Thus, as the Hawaiians say, the first flying ship was made in the time of Maui. On the third day, Maui came and saw the wonderful bird body thoroughly prepared for his journey. Maui went inside. Keolokele said, "When you reach that land, look for a village. If the people are not there, look to the beach. If there are many people, your wife and Pea-pea, the eight-eyed, will be there. Do not go near, but fly out over the sea. The people will say, 'Oh, the strange bird.' But Pea-pea will say, 'This is my bird. It is Kapu.' You can then come to the people." Maui pulled the aiai ropes fastened to the wings and made them move. Thus he flew away into the sky. 2 days were his journey before he came to that strange island, Moana Liha Ika Waiokele. It was a beautiful land. He flew inland to a village, but there were no people, according to the ancient chant. The houses of Lima Loa stand, but there are no people. They are at Mana. The people were by the sea. Maui flew over them. He saw his wife, but he passed on, flying out over the sea, skimming like a seabird down to the water and rising gracefully up to the sky. Pea-pea called out, "This is my bird. It is Kapu." Maui heard and came to the beach. He was caught and placed in a kapu box. The servants carried him up to the village and put him in the chief's sleeping house when Pea-pea and his people returned to their homes. In the night, Pea-pea and Maui's wife lay down to sleep. Maui watched Pea-pea, hoping he would soon sleep. Then he would kill him. Maui waited. 1 eye was closed, 7 eyes were open. Then 4 eyes closed, leaving 3. The night was almost past and dawn was near. Then Maui called to Hina with his spirit voice, "Oh, Hina, keep it dark." Hina made the gray dawn dark in the 3 eyes, and 2 slept. The last eye was weary, and it also slept. Then Maui went out of the bird body and cut off the head of Pea-pea and put it inside the bird. He broke the roof of the house until a large opening was made. He took his wife, Kumulama, and flew away to the island of Oahu. The winds blew hard against the flying bird. Rain fell in torrents around it, but those inside had no trouble. Thus, Maui returned with his wife to his home in Oahu. The story is Pau, finished. Maui invents kite flying. The Hawaiian myths are perhaps the only ones of the Pacific Ocean that give to any of the gods the pleasure and excitement of kite flying. Maui, after repeated experiments, made a large kite for himself. It was much larger than any house of his time or generation. He twisted a long line from the strong fibers of the native plant known as the olona. He endowed both kite and string with marvelous powers and launched the kite up towards the clouds. It rose very slowly. The winds were not lifting it up into the sky. Maui remembered that an old priest lived in Piapia Valley, the largest and finest valley of the large island of Hawaii, on which he made his home. This priest had a covered calabash in which he compelled the winds to hide when he did not wish them to play on land and sea. The priest's name was Kalei Oku, and his calabash was known as Ipu Makani a Kamaumau, the calabash of the perpetual winds. Maui called for the priest who had charge of the winds to open his calabash and let them come up to Hilo and blow along the Wailuku River. The natives say that the place where Maui stood was marked by the pressure of his feet in the lava rocks of the riverbank as he braced himself to hold the kite against the increasing force of the winds that pushed it towards the sky. Then the enthusiasm of kite flying filled his youthful soul, and he cried aloud, screaming his challenge along the coast of the sea towards Waiapio. "O winds, winds of Waiapio, in the calabash of Keleioku, come from the Ipu Makani. O wind, the wind of Hilo, come quickly, come with power." Then the priest lifted the cover of the calabash of the winds and let the strong winds of Hilo escape. Along the seacoast they rushed until, as they entered Hilo Bay, they heard the voice of Maui calling, "O winds, winds of Hilo, hasten and come to me." With a tumultuous rush, the strong winds turned towards the mountains. They forced their way along the gorges and palisades of the Wailuku River. They leaped into the heavens, making a fierce attack upon the monster which Maui had sent into the sky. The kite struggled as it was pushed upward by the hands of the fierce winds, but Maui rejoiced. His heart was uplifted by the joy of the conflict in which his strength to hold was pitted against the power of the winds to tear away. And again, he shouted toward the sea, "O winds, the winds of Hilo, come to the mountains, come." The winds, which had been stirring up storms on the face of the waters, came inland. They dashed against Maui. They climbed the heights of the skies until they fell with full violence against their mighty foe hanging in the heavens. The kite had been made of the strongest kapa cloth that Maui's mother could prepare. It was not torn, although it was bent backward to its utmost limit. Then the strain came on the strong cord of olona fiber. The line was stretched and strained as the kite was pushed back. Then Maui called again and again for stronger winds to come. The cord was drawn out until the kite was far above the mountains. At last it broke, and the kite was tossed over the craters of the volcanoes to the land of the district of Kau on the other side of the island. Then Maui was angry and hastily leaped over the mountains, which are nearly 14,000 feet high. In half a dozen strides, he had crossed the 50 or 60 miles from his home to the place where the kite lay. He could pass over many miles with a single step. His name was Maui Mama, Maui the Swift. When Maui returned with his kite, he was more careful in calling the winds to aid him in his sports. The people watched their wise neighbor and soon learned that the kite could be a great blessing to them. When it was soaring in the sky, there was always dry and pleasant weather. It was a day for great rejoicing. They could spread out their kapa cloth to dry as long as the kite was in the sky. They could carry out their necessary work without fear of the rain. Therefore, when anyone saw the kite beginning to float along the mountainside, he would call out joyfully, "Ee, Maui's kite is in the heavens." Maui would send his kite into the blue sky and then tie the line to the great black stones in the bed of the Wailuku River. Maui soon learned the power of his kite when blown upon by a fierce wind. With his accustomed skill, he planned to make use of his strong servant, and therefore took the kite with him on his journeys to the other islands, using it to aid in making swift voyages. With the wind in the right direction, the kite could pull his double canoe very easily and quickly to its destination. Time passed, and even the demigod died. The fishhook with which he drew the Hawaiian islands up from the depths of the sea was allowed to lie on the lava by the Wailuku River until it became a part of the stone. The double canoe was carried far inland and then permitted to petrify by the riverside. The two stones which represent the double canoe now bear the name of Wa Kauhi, and the kite has fallen from the sky far up on the mountainside, where it still rests, a flat plot of rich land between Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa.